Did you know that an apparently discrete figure like Seth plays an essential role in the history of humanity? Often overlooked in the more popular narratives, Seth is not only the son of Adam and Eve, but also the key to the continuity of faith and hope in a world that had already been lost. Imagine growing up in a post-Eden world where corruption and violence, symbolized by his brother Cain, were lurking. Yet, Seth brought with him a promise of renewal, creating a lineage that not only preserved faith, but expanded it for future generations. And the most intriguing part? He didn't do this in a grand or visible way, but with a silent and unwavering faith that left a lasting legacy. However, there's something else you probably don't know about Seth's story. In a time when humanity was on the brink of chaos, he became a pillar of stability and justice. But what exactly made Seth so crucial for the future of humanity? Perhaps the answer lies in the power of faithfulness in times of crisis. While the world was sinking into ambition and power, he kept the flame of faith alive. Get ready to discover how Seth's life not only shaped a generation, but defined the trajectory of a new beginning that would culminate in the greatest of renewers, Noah. When we look at the story of Seth, it's impossible not to notice that he appears as a divine response to Cain's violence. Born as the new beginning of humanity, Seth carries powerful symbolism. He is a sign of hope, renewal, and the continuation of faith. After Abel's death, the world was marked by a great loss, but God, in his wisdom, brought Seth to restore balance. It's as if the Creator were saying, where there is darkness, there is always the possibility of light. Seth wasn't just born. He carried with him the mission to preserve what had been lost through Cain's violence. He brought with him the promise of continuity, like a link in an unbreakable chain of faith and hope. Imagine, for example, a garden that, after a devastating storm, begins to bloom again. That's how the birth of Seth symbolizes the return to divine order and the trust that life will always find a way to continue. Faith never dies. It adapts. It reinvents itself. It's important to reflect on Seth's role in the succession of faith. Sometimes, in moments of pain and destruction, we don't see the possibility of renewal. But Seth teaches us that, in God, renewal is always within our reach. How have you been seeking renewal in your life? What has been your Seth? That new beginning that can emerge even in the midst of difficulties. As we look at the continuation of the story, we see that the birth of Seth is just the beginning of something bigger. His lineage will lead to the foundation of a new cycle of life, which later will be marked by the arrival of Enos, his son. Every generation is an opportunity for renewal, and that renewal is something we should all seek. For you, what is this renewal? How does it manifest in your life, in your daily routine? Indeed, Seth represents this renewing light that not only resurrects hope, but keeps the flame of faith alive across generations. His birth wasn't just a historical event, but an affirmation that, even in the darkest moments, there will always be a chance for renewal. And as we see the continuation of this lineage, we cannot help but reflect on how we, too, can be the bearers of this hope to the world around us. Just like Seth, we can all be instruments of renewal. The childhood of Seth was undoubtedly marked by a blend of joy and sorrow. Growing up in a home where his parents, Adam and Eve, still felt the weight of the loss of Eden, gave young Seth a unique perspective. He never knew paradise, but he heard stories that helped him understand what had been lost and at the same time, what could still be achieved through faithfulness to God. Adam and Eve, as parents, could not help but transmit to their children the pain of the original sin, but also the lessons that would come from a restored relationship with the Creator. Seth, listening to the stories of Eden, understood that human life was a cycle between error and redemption. At the same time, he understood the role of obedience as a means to restore what had been lost. Eden, to him, was not just a memory of what could not be, but a symbol of what could be achieved through faith and continuous effort. Often, We hear about our own losses and challenges, but, like Seth, we are called to find meaning and purpose in everything that happens to us, even in suffering. Seth grew up with the understanding that his family's story was not just a story of losses. He knew that through God, there could be a recovery of the lost glory. The beauty of learning from the past is that it provides us with a foundation to shape the future. And Seth, in his youth, knew how to take advantage of this wisdom. The lesson here is clear. The difficulties we face can teach us more than we imagine if we are willing to listen and learn from them. This is an important point of reflection. What do we do with the stories we inherit? In our lives, we all carry the weight of our past experiences. Like Seth, we have the opportunity to learn from them and give them new meaning. Instead of being victims of our history, we can be the creators of a better future, guided by the wisdom of the lessons passed down to us. How can you do this in your own life? Therefore, Seth's childhood was not only a preparation for adulthood, but also a reflection on what it really means to understand and honor what was lost. His childhood was a phase of adaptation, where he learned to live between the pain of loss and the hope of restoration. He not only heard about Eden, but he internalized that story as a key to understanding his role in the world and his connection with God. And like him, we are all called to live our lives with open hearts, learning from the past to create a future of purpose and fulfillment. Unlike the lineage of Cain, marked by violence and unchecked ambition, Seth stood out as a man of unwavering faith and stability. From an early age, he understood that his mission was to build a solid life, grounded in divine principles. Seth was not a man of great material achievements or grand feats in the eyes of the world, but rather a man who devoted himself to cultivating peace and justice. His life, marked by righteousness, became a beacon to those around him, showing that true greatness lies in living with integrity and following the ways of God. What is the true stability that Seth possessed? It's not merely the absence of external turbulence, but above all, an inner peace that comes from a deep connection with the Creator. He knew that, regardless of the circumstances, his faith would be the foundation that would sustain his life. Today, this same stability is something that many seek. But how can we find that balance amidst the chaos of the modern world? The answer may lie in making more room for prayer, meditation, and strengthening our connection with the spiritual. Seth teaches us that, even in difficult times, peace can be cultivated within us. Seth, unlike Cain, did not seek power or control over others. His focus was on living according to divine precepts and being an example for his family and community. In his lineage, we see a reflection of the eternal truth. True strength does not come from violence or ambition, but from faith and justice. Imagine, for example, that you have the chance to positively influence the lives of those around you. How could you become this person of peace and wisdom, like Seth? Perhaps it's time to reflect on your values and how you convey them to others. Seth, with his stable faith, also knew that he did not need to seek recognition or fame. He simply did what was right, knowing that, in the end, his life would be a testimony of faith. In our lives, we are constantly tempted to seek external approval, but Seth teaches us that divine approval is what truly matters. How can you apply this lesson in your life? Perhaps it's time to focus more on your own integrity and less on seeking validation from others. This is the secret to living with true peace and without unnecessary worries. Finally, Seth's life is a profound lesson for all of us. Stability and inner peace come from our unwavering faith. He teaches us that we don't need to be recognized for great deeds, but we can build a legacy of faith and integrity. As we reflect on this, we realize that the most important things in life are not found in external achievements, but in the character we cultivate and the way we live our faith day by day. And this is a lesson that, if learned, can transform the course of our lives. The world of Seth was clearly divided. On one side, there was the lineage of Cain, which was dedicated to the relentless pursuit of power and material achievements. Cain and his descendants lived their lives in constant competition, driven by the desire for control and the belief that greatness lay in the accumulation of wealth and dominion over others. On the other side, Seth and his lineage represented a completely different path, focused on devotion to God, building a life rooted in faith and justice. While Cain drifted away from divine truth, the lineage of Seth grew closer and closer to the Creator. This division between the two paths shows us a fundamental truth. The values we choose to adopt completely shape our reality. Cain's lineage sought material success, while Seth's understood that true success came from obedience and connection with God. In today's world, this division continues to manifest in various forms. On one side, we have people who seek power at any cost, and on the other, those who dedicate themselves to a simpler but more meaningful life in search of a higher purpose. The question is, which of these paths have you been following in your life? Seth and his descendants chose to be devoted to God in a world that seemed to have lost itself in selfish desires. They knew that the real value of life was in living justly, serving others, and seeking the greater good. This is a powerful lesson. True wealth does not lie in accumulating possessions, but in building a legacy of faith, kindness, and integrity. If you look around you, you'll notice that the pursuit of power and fame is still a constant in society. But few remember that true greatness comes from serving others and devotion to what is greater than us. This contrast between the two lineages teaches us that at every moment, we have a choice. Follow the path of endless ambition or the path of devotion and wisdom. What makes us great is not the material goods we accumulate, but the way we impact others' lives with our actions and values. In our daily lives, we can decide to focus more on what is eternal and divine rather than on the fleeting things that, in the end, do not bring lasting happiness. Seth, even though he lived in a divided world, kept his devotion strong. In times when everyone around him sought more and more, he chose to give more of himself, cultivating peace and living according to God's principles. And here arises a question. Have you followed this line of thought? Have you sought what truly matters like Seth? Or have you been swept away by the constant pursuit of more power and wealth? The true measure of our life is the impact we have on others' lives, not the quantity of possessions we accumulate. As we reflect on this division between the lineages, we are challenged to make a choice in our own lives. The life of Seth shows us that, even in a world that values power and ambition, it is possible to follow a different path, a path of faith and dedication to God. And perhaps, by making this choice, we can find the true peace and fulfillment that so many seek, but few manage to achieve. When Enos, the son of Seth, emerged in history, he was not just a continuation of his father's lineage, but also the beginning of a renewed spiritual movement. Enos, inspired by his father's faith, carried with him the flame of devotion and prayer. He not only followed Seth's example, but also helped spread the idea that, in order to truly find peace and salvation, one must call upon the name of God. The importance of Enos cannot be underestimated, as it was he who established a firmer foundation for worshiping God, and his influence endured for generations. Enos lived in a time when the world was still trying to recover from the devastation caused by sin. And as a spiritual leader, he was the key to restoring the practice of prayer and calling on God's name. He understood that, amidst so many adversities, prayer was a link that could connect humanity to the Creator. What we can learn from this is that, just like Enos, we too have the power to spark a spiritual renewal movement by keeping the flame of faith alive in our hearts and in our daily practice. Through Enos, we see how the faith of one man can profoundly influence his generation. He didn't just stay in the theory of faith. He lived it and passed it on to others. Often, we talk about the importance of prayer and faith, but the real question is, are we truly living according to these principles? Enos teaches us that true transformation begins within us, and that by manifesting our faith in the world, we can inspire others to do the same. Think about your own life. Have you been an example of faith and prayer to those around you? Enos certainly was. Enos was also a symbol of how faith can be passed down from generation to generation. His practice of praying and calling on God's name wasn't something isolated, but a legacy he passed on to his children and grandchildren. Thus, it's important to understand that our own faith has a lasting impact on future generations. If we want to leave a true legacy, we must start by setting the example. What are you doing today to ensure that your faith is passed on? Are your actions reflecting the principles you want your children or followers to adopt? In difficult times, like the ones Enos lived through, his ability to inspire others to turn to God is a remarkable example. He knew that the only way to face adversity and restore balance in the world was to turn to the divine. The same applies today, where we often feel alone in our struggles. Enos shows us that, by calling on God's name, we can find strength and direction. Perhaps, when looking at our own lives, we can ask ourselves, are we doing enough to keep this flame of faith alive, just as Enos did? Noah, a descendant of Seth, was born in a time of deep corruption and moral decay. The world had become so distorted that humanity was on the brink of destruction due to its own wickedness. Noah, however, was chosen by God to be the instrument of preserving life. While the rest of the world was caught up in violence and perversity, Noah remained faithful and righteous, an example of integrity in times of decay. His mission was grand, to save both animal and human life, providing a new beginning for creation. He was called to build the ark, not merely as a boat, but as a promise that God still had plans for humanity. Noah was not chosen by chance. His life was a demonstration of unwavering faith and obedience to God. In a time of hopelessness, Noah was a light that showed that faithfulness to God is always rewarded, even when everything around us seems to be falling apart. Like Noah, we all face moments of crisis and chaos. His story teaches us that, even in the worst circumstances, true faith can save and guide us. As we reflect on Noah's life, we may ask ourselves, how have we lived our faith? Are we ready to follow God's direction, even when the winds of adversity blow strong? What makes Noah even more remarkable is the fact that he maintained his faith in God when no one else seemed to have hope. He was not affected by the corruption around him, nor was he swayed by the disbelief of the people in his time. Imagine how difficult it must have been to build an ark in a land where no one believed the flood was coming. But Noah stood firm, because he knew that obedience to God was more important than popular acceptance. In moments when the choices of the majority seem like the easiest ones, it is crucial to keep our trust in God, just as Noah did. The flood and the building of the ark are powerful symbols of renewal and hope. They remind us that when the world seems to be crumbling, God has the power to bring restoration and new beginnings. Noah was chosen to preserve creation, and he fulfilled this mission with courage and faith. Similarly, each of us has a role to play in God's divine plan. It may not be something as grand as building an ark, but our response to God will determine the impact we have in the world. How can we be more obedient and willing to act according to God's will in our lives? Noah, therefore, is not just a biblical hero, but a living example of how we can, with faith and dedication, face difficult times and even help restore what was lost. His story challenges us to be people of integrity, even when the world around us seems to be crumbling. He teaches us that, with God, there is always a chance for a new beginning. When we look at our own lives, we are called to be like Noah, keeping our faith strong and acting with courage, even when those around us doubt our journey. The legacy of Seth, though subtle, was fundamental to the preservation of the divine lineage that would culminate in Noah and later in other great men of faith. Often, Seth's impact may seem small or discreet, but it is in this kind of silent legacy that we find the true strength of faith. Seth did not seek fame or glory. He dedicated himself to obedience to God and to building a life of justice and integrity. This kind of faith, though seemingly quiet, provides a solid foundation upon which future generations can build their own relationship with God. The true greatness of Seth is that he became a pillar on which the entire lineage of faith was supported. He was not the center of attention nor the hero of the story, but his faithfulness and obedience to God ensured that the divine plan moved forward. In our own lives, we often do not see the immediate impact of our actions, but it is the continuous effort and dedication to what is right that truly creates a lasting legacy. Seth's example teaches us that even in an apparently ordinary life, we can do great things when we live with a heart turned toward God. Seth, unlike many others, did not seek to transform the world around him in spectacular ways. He focused on living according to God's will, being a silent example of faith to others. This kind of impact often goes unnoticed by others, but it is the kind of legacy that is passed down from generation to generation. How can you be like Seth in your own life? Instead of seeking external approval and recognition, you can create a lasting legacy by living with integrity, love, and genuine faith in God. The legacy of Seth, passed on to his children and grandchildren, established the foundation for the rise of men and women who, throughout history, would be instruments of God. The lineage that began with him not only survived but thrived, as it was built on the unchanging values of faith and obedience. The true strength of Seth was that he understood that the most important work he would do would be to build a solid foundation of faith that would sustain the generations to come. What this teaches us is that, in our own lives, we can be the founders of something that will last long beyond us. Therefore, the legacy of Seth, though silent, is immeasurable. He was not a man of great public deeds or fame, but his faithfulness to God and his commitment to justice were the foundations upon which the greatest men of faith, like Noah, rose up. Like Seth, we too have the opportunity to build a legacy that, even without immediate recognition, will continue to impact future generations. Perhaps it's time to reflect on the legacy you are building today and how your actions may endure, just like Seth's legacy. Now that you know Seth's story, it's time to reflect. What legacy are you building? Just like him, many of us live in a world full of challenges and temptations, where true faith is often lost. But the big question is, are you willing to be the Seth in your own life? Are you ready to create a legacy of faith and obedience that will extend across generations, even without great applause or immediate recognition? Think about it. How do your choices today impact those around you and even future generations? Have you been a pillar of stability and faith, like Seth, amidst the storms of life? Don't put off until tomorrow what you can start today. The faith you carry and the way you live it can transform the world around you. If you feel inspired by this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Keep learning how ordinary people like Seth can make a difference in a world that often overlooks the power of true faith. Together, let's build a legacy that not only restores but inspires others to do the same.